What's interesting about Revelation 14 is that it's a combination of tribulation and wrath. And the first thing that we notice here is the group of people singing the Song of Moses. Who is that? Well, that's the woman who was supernaturally protected right here. The woman that was supernaturally protected, who's going to be raptured alive because she was nourished with food and water, Revelation 12. She didn't die. Antichrist couldn't get her. He was wroth with the woman and went after the remnant of her seed, which is the unprotected, unnourished saints, the remnant of her seed around the world. But right here we see a picture of the ones that were protected. And look and behold, a lamb stood on a mountain, and his 144,000 that have his Father's name written on it. What were they doing? They were singing songs, playing harps, right? They were redeemed from the earth, right? And so we see a picture of those people that'll be singing their own special song in the next chapter that we just read, the two groups singing two different kinds of songs. So these guys are singing a different song than the remnant of her seed will be singing. Okay? So let's keep reading. It identifies that. And let's continue. And it talks about this group who is supernaturally protected. And then it gets into three angels that are coming and warning about those that are not protected. And it starts off with an angel coming down preaching the everlasting gospel. So what we have here is three angels, and the one in the middle has to do with wrath. The first one and the third one have to do with tribulation. That's why it's a mixture chapter. Number one, first angel talks about the gospel being preached. Obviously, the resurrection and rapture has not taken place yet. This is still during the great tribulation hour, right? So you're not going to have preaching of the gospel during the wrath of God. It's still taking place during the tribulation hour. The second angel is the fall of Babylon, which happens during the wrath, during the vials of wrath, during the pouring out of the hardest part of the judgments. And the third angel is about the mark of the beast, which brings us back into the great tribulation period. So it's very interesting how he mixes these angels together to definitely signify that this chapter is about both time periods. This chapter is about both time periods. Okay? So we have an angel up here preaching the everlasting gospel. We got an angel down here warning about the mark of the beast. Both of these time periods are during the Great Tribulation, and we got one angel in the middle that's talking about the fall of Babylon, which clearly happens in chapter 17 and 18. Those are the wrath chapters. So it's a mixture of things taking place in both the tribulation and the wrath of God. Okay? So we have a picture of the woman who is saved without any trouble right here. And then we got a picture of those that are going to go through a lot of trouble, the mark of the beast, that still have to be concerned about taking that thing down here. And we still can sense the two different groups taking place that are all part of Christ, all part of the bride. We're all part of the same, family. That's nevertheless, God has, got a purpose for each group for his own good pleasures. Okay. Now, starting in chapter 14, we're going to see the two reapers. And what God showed me today, give me a 7 if you guys are with me on this. I want to show you what God showed me. Some of you probably already seen this. So, you'll be like, yeah, you finally saw that, Wayne, Levi, yeah. I mean, we saw that a long time ago. Well, I know, I'm a little slow to the party sometimes. But here's what I saw. There are two reapers in this chapter. One is for the righteous and one is for the wicked, but the first reaper is not an angel. And I kept saying it was an angel because I was quickly assimilating what Jesus said. I'm going to send my angels to gather you. And there are angels that reap. There are reaping angels. And it could be that this is a combination of all that put together. But the man that's going to do the reaping for the righteous is like the Son of Man. He's not called an angel. Let's read it. He's not called an angel. I looked and beheld on a white cloud, and upon one it sat. On this cloud was like the Son of Man, having his head with a golden crown, and the Son of Man sitting on a cloud had a sharp sickle in his hand. This is not an angel. If it is an angel, it doesn't make it very clear that this is an angel. All right? It could say something like the angel of God or something like that. But it says it's like unto the Son of Man. So this is what it looked like the Son of Man sitting on this cloud. He had a sharp sickle in his hand. So this is Jesus, or a righteous angel, or someone righteous looking like the Son of Man. Clearly is distinctly different than an angel reaping for wicked souls. So Jesus is coming back to collect his elect. So we're putting all this together with this first sickle here, right? Now let's see, another angel came. Well, it says another angel, doesn't it? Let me see. Yeah, it does say another angel, but that could be tying to the fact that these are all angels. So there's one third angel, second angel. It doesn't necessarily mean the one sitting on the cloud is an angel. Keep that in mind. Just because it says, and another angel came out, we've already talked about 3 angels in this chapter. So now we're talking about another angel coming out, but he's talking to the one like unto the Son of Man who's sitting on the cloud. And what does this other angel say to the one like the Son of Man sitting on the cloud who had a sharp sickle in his hand? What does he say? The angel says, crying with a loud voice to the one that sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time has come to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. So it was the man sitting on the cloud that did the reaping, not the angel. And I said, well, that's interesting. That looks like Jesus collecting his righteous. And why do I say that? Well, Jesus says, when I appear in this, I'm going to send my angels to collect the elect. But that's after he thrusts in his sickle. You guys with me on that? It doesn't take away from Jesus sending his angels to collect. It doesn't take away from Jesus sending his angels to collect, which is what he said in Matthew 24. It just gives us information who's doing who's thrusting in the sickle, right? So the man on the cloud's thrusting in his sickle. The angels are going to do the collecting. Now that's the righteous people. Why do I say that's the righteous people? Well, for one, the Son of Man sitting on the clouds is doing the thrusting, number one. Number two, there's no mention of wrath in this part. Chapter 14, chapter 15, and 16 have nothing to do with wrath. Now let's read further. Chapter 17 and onward, though, comes another reaper. Now this is an angel. Another angel came out having a sharp sickle. This angel has a sharp sickle, unlike the other angel who was just announcing to thrust it in. This angel comes out with a sharp sickle. And then another angel came out of the altar with power of fire, and he cried with a loud voice to the one with the sharp sickle. So what we have is a man on a cloud with a sickle and an angel telling him to thrust it in. Then we have another angel with a sharp sickle and another angel telling him to thrust it in. So there's four components here. 2 holding 2 sickles, and 2 announcing to thrust it in. Everybody with me on that? Now, what's different about this reaping than the one that we read about the Son of Man sitting on the cloud? Well, look what it says. This angel says, thrust in thy sickle and gather the cluster of the vines of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle in the earth and gathered the vines of the earth. And look what it says, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. It is more than abundantly clear that this reaping and this group of people and this sickle is for the wicked. Can I get an amen if you see that? And the winepress was trodden under the city, blood came out of the horse's brow. So that is, and the next thing we read, brothers and sisters, the next thing that we read is the judgment in heaven. And those that had victory over the Antichrist, being judged, singing songs, and praising God. And you can't deny that that is after the resurrection rapture, after the 7th trumpet in the tribulation period, when the 7th trumpet finally blows. We got all that stuff taking place with the mark of the beast, the preaching of the gospel, the announcement that the fall of Babylon is coming, all mixed in. Chapter 14, the 2 angels thrusting in their sickles, or and collecting the different groups of people. And then we see the judgment of the saints taking place first, while, look what it says, while the wrath is getting ready to be poured out. Chapter 15 is about the wrath getting ready to be poured out while they're being judged. Some people will be like, well, why would God come back and then come back again? Because there is a judgment that needs to be taken place. Why would God collect us in a rapture, resurrection rapture, take us off the earth, and then come right back down with us? You ever hear somebody ask that? Well, there's a good reason. First, the earth has got to be purged of the wicked. And secondly, we have a wedding supper. And thirdly, we have a judgment that takes place. This takes time. It takes time. And he's not just coming to get us, collecting us, and coming right down immediately. This is a 75-day period. And it's not like he's coming up on Friday morning to gather us, and then Friday afternoon he's coming back that quick. It's not that quick. There is over 2 months worth of time that goes by, right? Almost 3 months worth of time, 2.5 months. So what we see here is the angels are preparing to pour out the wrath, and then immediately talks about the judgment of the saints. While that's taking place, the angels are getting ready, right? And then we can continue to see that the 7 angels came out of the temple having the 7 plagues. It's not poured out yet, right? They're clothed with all these beautiful garments. And one of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels the golden vials full of the wrath of God. You see the preparation? You see how it's being done? Chapter 15, it's the judgment of the saints while the angels are preparing, being equipped with the vials of wrath, right? Everybody see that. Everybody see that. Chapter 16 starts the pouring of all 7 vials. Now let's look at our chart today and put that all together. Okay, so what did we talk about? We talked about all this tribulation is done at the 7th trumpet. The 7th trumpet blows, and all that tribulation is gone. Then we're left with just the wrath part. Just the wrath. We talked about why chapter 14 is just basically a cartilage chapter. It connects the 2 bone parts. In the book of Daniel, it talks about 1,335 days and the 1,260 days. In chapter 12, you can go study that. So the difference between 1,335 and 1,260 is 75 days. There's 75 days left over. Okay, let's continue here. So once the 7th trumpet blows, all we have left here is the pouring out of the vials of wrath and the fall of Babylon and the return of Jesus to destroy the armies. That all takes place after the 7th trumpet. That all takes place during the 6th seal. If we look at this closely, we'll see that in chapter 14, when the Son of Man sitting on the clouds, right? When he thrusts in his sickle, Son of Man, that's going to be synchronized perfectly with the 7th trumpet. Can I get an amen if you understand that in your mind and in your understanding? That even though it doesn't say that there, we know that that's what's going on. We know that that's what's going on because we have been able to discern and put these pieces together. Okay? So what we have here is the Son of Man reaping, and then we also have the reaper of the wicked. And just because it's happening in this chapter, that does not mean that these chapters over here are not part of that, because they are. These are part of this reaping. It's just telling us ahead of time. It's just telling us ahead of time before it actually happens that there's a separate angel and a separate reaper and a separate sickle for this group of for what's going to happen over here. Okay, that's all it is. And what we see in chapter 15 at the top are the angels getting ready to pour out their wrath while there is a judgment and celebration of the elect, right? And then they're handed the full measure of the wrath of God over here. And they're just waiting, and they're getting ready to come out and do it. It's a very short chapter. It's more like see, they're getting ready with the wrath. There's a judgment. You can see them handed the wrath, and they're getting ready to just pour it out. Okay, and then so we see all 7 vials of wrath poured out in that chapter right there. And the next 2 chapters we read about the fall of Babylon. Of course, that's going to be taking place during that time, right? And then sometime during the fall of Babylon and all these vials, we see Jesus coming down on a horse to make war with whoever's fighting against him over here. In fact, that war is actually in the 6th vial. The 6th vial is a war between God and the armies of the earth. The 7th vial is nothing more than thunders, lightnings, and voices saying it is finished. So the end, with Christ coming back on a horse over here, is actually the end over here where the 6th vial is being poured out. Fall of Babylon, this just happens as a consequence of what you're reading about in chapter 16. It's not like the 7th vial is poured out. It says it is finished, and then we read about the fall of Babylon happening after that. That is not what happens. It's not chronological. It's sequential. It's harmonistically. It's harmony. Okay, so what do we got here? So I'm just trying to show you where the seventh trumpet in chapter 6 would be between the 5th and 6th seal. We talked about that already. The only time you actually read about the 7th trumpet actually blowing is in the 11th chapter. That's the only time it's physically mentioned, but we can see it. We can see where it would be taking place in the other chapters. So yeah, in between the 5th and 6th seal is the 7th trumpet. We actually read about that at the 7th trumpet. We see it actually says in that chapter that the wrath is coming. It says it right after that trumpet blows. It talks about wrath again. It's interesting that the timing of the word wrath appears exactly where it's supposed to. Where? After the 7th trumpet, after the tribulation, you'll see the word wrath used right there again. And then the next time we can understand that the 7th trumpet is blowing is when the Son of Man is doing the reaping on the cloud. He's going to gather together his righteous. So we can understand that that must be where the trumpet will be blowing. And then we read about what? Wrath again. It's interesting, huh? So what do we talk about? What happens after this area that we think the 7th trumpet's going to blow? Well, there's another angel coming to gather together the wicked for wrath again. You see how wrath is mentioned again in the right place after where we think the 7th trumpet would probably be blowing. You guys see how that works? And then we see all the wrath being poured out. Yep, so wrath is mentioned at the end of chapter 14 after the 7th trumpet would be blown. It's mentioned, wrath is mentioned after the 7th trumpet is actually blown and talked about in the only chapter the 7th chapter is mentioned. Physically, wrath is mentioned after the 7th trumpet is blown, and wrath is mentioned only in the 6th seal and not in any other seal. We see trouble, we see starvation, we see tribulation, we see suffering, but the word wrath itself is not mentioned until we get to the 6th seal. All this is connected and synchronized. So, okay. So, one more time. All the seals are chronological all the way down to 6. After this tribulation is the 7th trumpet, and after that is the wrath of the Lamb coming. After the 7th trumpet blows in Revelation chapter 11, it's talking about the wrath is come again. And then after the reaping of the saints by the Son of Man with his sickle, we have a reaper that comes in to gather for the wrath of the winepresses of the wrath of God at the end, where you would expect it to be mentioned. And then the next chapters, we see the angels being given the vials of wrath in chapter 15 while the saints are singing songs in heaven. And then you see all those vials of wrath poured out during that time would be the fall of Babylon in the next 2 chapters, and Christ finally coming back on a horse to finish off those vials of wrath with a war. And it is done at that point right there. Okay, you guys all getting it? Again, this is where we would put the 7th trumpet if we were to think about where it's going to blow in the other chapters. It's only mentioned in chapter 11. That's where it's physically written in the book. But in terms of chapters 12, 13, and 14, we know that if the Antichrist in chapter 13 is going to rule for 42 months, for instance, well, after that 3.5-year time period, we would understand that the trumpet is going to blow after that. That's why we have it down here at the end of that chapter. It's not mentioned in the chapter. That's just where it would be. After that, after the Antichrist is dominating for 42 months, then we have the blowing of the 7th trumpet. Chapter 12, again, is talking about 2 different groups of people. One is going to be raptured alive, and the other one is probably going to die during that time period. And so what does it talk about? It talks about 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years. A time times and half a time, it calls it 2 when it's talking about both groups, but that's still a 3.5-year period. So after the dragon cannot get the woman, he goes after the remnant of her seed. He's got 3.5 years to do it, but at the end of that, which is what we read in chapter 13, he's got 42 months only. At the end of that 42 months, it's the same time period that's after the end of the 1,260 days. It's just called 1,260 days because he's referring to his righteous elect. It's called 42 months when he's referring to the Antichrist people, and that's why you have the 2 different terms that's used. It's not 2 different time periods. It's the same time period with 2 different names. When it's finished, the 7th trumpet would blow. And so that's why we put the 7 down there. And that's why we're trying to figure out how all these chapters connect, how everything links together.